So now let us dive in. Yeah, let's introduce our speakers. Like I said earlier, at Xuriel here, we bring to you speakers, well-seasoned speakers, to speak to you on topics that are so relatable to you in the people, culture, productivity, and organizational industry. I don't know if there's an industry like that, but you can just know what I'm talking about. When we talk about human resources, when we talk about productivity, we talk about people, we talk about culture, we at Xuriel bring to you speakers to speak to you on topics that relate very, very well to you. And this month we did not go less. So our first speaker today is none other than Oluwatoyin Sonny. She's a lead consultant at Business Skills Services, and she is a certified HR professional with over 20 years of experience spanning aviation, travel and tourism, haulage, logistics, maritime and shipping, and her career trajectory covers business operations, learning and development, and human resources. And when I say Oluwatoyin believes people are at the center of organizational growth, and how they are managed determines the profitability of the company, you can take me up on that. And she has worked with several companies, human capital for business growth, sustainability, and brand visibility. So on your screen there, you can see the link to our website at Business Skills Services. So please do well to check out our website, and they will be right there to attend to all of your needs. So please give me a drum roll to welcome Ms. Oluwatoyin Sonny to today's edition. Thank you. All right, so our second speaker for today is Confidence Obenawakama. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but please forgive me. Confidence is a data-driven HR operations and talent acquisition leader who works at the intersection of people, process, and performance. And with a background in healthcare, she brings a strong systems thinking approach to building scalable and efficient organizations. And she has led full cycle recruitment across global teams, coordinated hundreds HR professionals on transitioning to remote work, and shared insights on AI and automation at the Future of Work Roundtable 2026. And she is passionate about turning people data into practical, execution-ready SOPs that enhance performance while preserving the human element. So please welcome Ms. Confidence Obenawakama to today's edition. All right. Thank you so much. So we are now starting. So let's dive in. Let's get started to today's conversation. Our first speaker, Oluwatoyin Sonny, will be speaking with you on the human factor in operational excellence. All right. She'll be speaking with you. Sorry, please. Yeah, she'll be speaking with you on the human factor in operational excellence, particularly on HR and operations co-creation of SOPs. Oluwatoyin Sonny, please, you have the floor.
Okay, Mariam. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity given to me, and I do appreciate the introduction. Hello, everyone. I would say good morning to those of us that are on the same time zone. Every other person who is not on our time zone will say good day to you, and you're all welcome. So today we'll be looking at the human factor in operational excellence, specifically HR and operations co-creation of SOPs. Miriam, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, the session overview, we'll be looking at what we are going to be discussing. This session is focused on bridging the gap between HR strategy and operational execution in preparation and implementation of SOPs. There's something very there's something very interesting that happened when I received the brief for this session. It now occurred to me that I've never worked anywhere where HR and operations are collaborating to produce SOPs. As we heard from Miriam, it's usually the operations departments are creating their SOPs, or the HR goes to hire a consultant to create the SOPs. So there is no bridging gap. There's no collaborative efforts. So in this session, we'll look at why do we need why do we need to work together, the HR team and the operations team, in achieving the organizational goal. So it's what we are going to be looking at in this session. Okay, Miriam. Okay, we are going to be examining 4 modules. And the first module is the foundation of human-centric operational excellence. The second module is managing human factor in daily operations. Sorry, the second module is HR and operations co-creation of SOPs. The third module is managing the human factor in daily operations, while the last module is integrating operational excellence into the talent life cycle. We'll look at all these 4 modules and then demonstrate why it's important for the HR department and the operations department to work together in creating SOPs that are effective in moving the business of the company forward. So we'll go into the first module. Okay, so we are saying here, the foundation of human-centric operational excellence. What do we mean by human-centric or operational excellence? Human-centric operational excellence means that the human is at the center of the entire operations. And I'm sure we would all agree with that. In any enterprise, the people who are going to do the job are at the center of what is going to be done. And then they are the major determinants of the success or otherwise of what the enterprise is involved in. So here we are looking at creating that foundation that puts people at the center of operational excellence. So now we're going to be looking at the psychology of excellence, understanding how human judgment and behavior influence operational performance. What does this mean? This means that the people who are going to do the work, we need to be able to manage them and understand them in such a way that they are able to consistently put forth their best efforts in achieving the organizational goals that are required. The psychology of excellence means that there is a certain template, there is a certain condition under which people are going to always produce excellent results. Some of these conditions may include the work culture. Some of these conditions may include adaptability of the company to the current situation. I'm going to give a very good example for those of us who are in Nigeria. The situation we are facing in the last few weeks is a bit unusual in terms of power supply on one hand, in terms of the weather, the extreme heat, and then in terms of the global crisis affecting supply of fuel and distribution of fuel. So that means that a company would need to put all of this in focus in determining how to forge ahead. No company that is going to adapt will continue doing what they were doing as at December and November in March. That's what we mean by the psychology of excellence. You look at the overview and then you look at what do we need to do in achieving the desired results. We are not meant to work as if we are casting iron. No, we are meant to constantly adapt in order to achieve, in order to influence operational performance. Now, we're also going to be looking at, we would also discuss beyond lean tools, shifting from purely technical methodologies, which may include Six Sigma, to a holistic approach that values the human assets. We are at the center of everything that we wish to achieve. Now, it is not without putting in focus the people who are going to use the tools. One of the things we need to do is to ensure that the tool is adaptable to the need of the people who are going to use it. Not only that, we should also, all the decisions that will determine what tools we are going to be deployed, what tools are going to be deployed are determined by those who are going to use that tool. A tool is not deployed in isolation. It is deployed in consideration of those who are going to use it and the objective for which we want it to achieve. So if we are creating SOPs, it's not enough for us to use all this methodology, use all these systems, use all this framework without considering those who are going to create the SOPs or those who are going to implement the SOPs. That's what we mean by beyond lean tools. Shifting from purely technical methodologies to holistic approach. Holistic means 360 degrees and full circle that values the human assets. See how the people are described. Assets, human talents, people who are doing the work are assets. They need to be regarded as such, and they need to be treated as such. The capital is not going to move itself. The machinery is not going to operate itself. Humans are going to operate it. Even AI, where we are all headed and all of that, AI is working on inputs that's already been generated by the human talent. So the human talent, the talent will always be at the center of everything that we are doing in creating SOPs to work effectively in an organization. Then we look at leadership for operational excellence. We will look at the techniques for leading with humility, fostering trust, building a culture of continuous learning. You see, SOPs are so important. They are referred to as standard operating procedures. SOPs form the framework of how an organization determines to achieve its goals. Now, in doing that, the leadership, which refers to those who are creating the SOPs, in this instance, the HR team on one side and the operations team on the other side, what type of mindset do they need to have, those who are leading the team? It means that these are people who should be open to innovation. They should be open to constructive criticism. In a collaborative work setting, one person does not have the final say. It means that HR team and their team leader do not have the final say. Operations team and their team leader do not have the final say. Both parties need to come together and work together to achieve what they need to achieve. And then what type of leadership would foster growth in terms of what we are creating? We are talking about a leadership that is interested in continuous learning, meaning that even the most junior ranking person in the team can come up with a new idea to be incorporated in the SOP. The leader must listen, evaluate, and where it is found to have merit, accept it. Where it may not have merit in fitting into the existing structure, the leader must explain politely to the person who brought forth the idea. That's what we are saying. Leadership for operational excellence. In creating SOPs, quite frankly, there are a lot of egos in the room. The HR team, the operations team, everybody may think that they are trying to outdo the other. No, it only means that we are going to come together to collaborate in creating the best Can we go to module 2 now? Talking about HR and operations co-creation of SOPs, this is now the actual work. What we discussed in module 1 is the foundation. How do we prepare for it? This is now the actual work. The first thing we are required to do is to set up collaborative drafting workshop to document and regulatory compliance. What does this mean? This means that in drafting the SOPs, what used to obtain in the past is that somebody will sit down or download from the internet and say that this is the SOP and submit it. But no, We are moving away from that approach. That approach does not lead to sustainability of the business. Neither does it lead to achieving the organizational goals over a period of time. But when we set up a collaborative drafting workshop, we determine who does what. For operational reasons, we know that the people in operations, the team, are the ones who know best how to get the job done. They are the ones who know best what is required to do the job. Then what then is the role of the human resources in that workshop? The role of the human resources in that particular workshop, where it is not HR SOP, is to render support in the sense that you look at the compliance issues. Each industry has their own specific compliance issues, which means that each operations department has compliance issues that would need to be incorporated into the SOP, because that SOP is basically what we call a resumption Bible or a resumption Quran. When you start the job, this is what is given to you, is the how-to of doing the job. And then if you do it how you are supposed to do it, you will achieve the desired results which you are working towards. So in setting up that the workshop, it means that we are going to go through the processes of setting up a workshop, draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. Everything is harmonized into a final document. And we must hear the views of all parties concerned who are involved in working on drafting the SOP. It's very, very key. You cannot have a collaborative work without having where people sit down and brainstorm about it, virtually or physically. It's very important. Then we're also going to talk about human-centered design of, sorry for the typo, that should be human-centered design of SOPs, not human-centered design do SOPs. Please accept my apologies. It must be on account of the extreme heat. Okay, so human-centric design of SOPs. Write in clear, actionable steps using templates that account for human errors and situational awareness. So in this instance, I'm going to give an example of the aviation industry. I was in the aviation industry for about 19 years. It is a highly regulated industry. So what counts for our SOPs over there is that it is allowed to have revisions, meaning that an SOP is not finite and absolute. Updates are expected and updates are prepared. But then how do we document the updates? We document the updates as a revision to the SOP, like an addendum. It is numbered, detailed, and dated, so that we know that when there's a new occurrence, this was what we did to update our SOP. We would all agree that the times we are moving very fast. Therefore, SOP that was prepared 5 years ago, in fact, 2 years ago, would not be totally relevant in all areas without any revision. So that's what we mean here. Human-centered design of SOPs. Write in clear, actionable steps. Use templates that account for human errors and situational awareness. Times are changing. SOPs are not cast in iron. They must be updated over a period of time, but the updates must be documented. They must be documented and they must be dated so that there is a chronological sequence. We know what happened when and why we had to do this. For instance, I would expect that a lot of companies are reviewing their policy on intellectual property in the light of AI. This means that it is good to use whatever form of AI you are using to do your work, ChatGPT, Grok, or maybe even Gemini. But then it is not enough for you to put these queries in your AI and accept verbatim what has been given to you and then pass it off as original work. That has become a topical issue in the workplace today. Because some of us have erroneously assumed that once you put your prompts in your AI and then it gives you the response and all of that, that responses, you do not have to situate it into the peculiarity of your role or the company you are working. You just accept it verbatim and then you submit it. What that tends to happen is that we are going to be having watered down results, because that does not create room for innovativeness. The best way, which we have been told to use it, is to adapt it. Like you are getting the raw material, you now adapt it to the purpose for which you want to put it to. You adapt it for your industry and you adapt it for your company. So that's what I mean by human-centered design. Since we have been saying from the beginning, the people are at the center. So everything that we are doing regarding the SOPs, we are going to circle back to the people who are creating it and people who are going to use it. Okay, so lastly, we say define roles and responsibilities between HR teams and operations team to avoid confusion or duplication of functions. One of the first things that you normally go wrong with collaborative teamwork is that the roles and responsibilities are not clearly defined, meaning that who is to do what, under what circumstances, and when are they expected to submit or put out the result of what they have done. When we don't have clearly defined roles, it leads to confusion. When there is confusion, there becomes crisis. Those who are working on it become less inclined. At the end of the day, it will become nobody's job. Your SOP may not come out until 1 year after when you have started drafting that SOP. But when you have clearly defined roles and responsibility in the light of their capabilities, and then you have the expected dates of submission, you will find that people are more committed to working on that project of drafting the SOP than if we just leave it and say it's our departmental work. Even in the departments, individuals have their roles about what they will do in drafting the SOPs that align with the needs of the company. Okay, can we go to module 3 now, please? So here we are looking at managing the human factor in daily operations. Now, while we are still talking about creating SOPs that align with the expected results of the company, that align with profitability and then sustainability, we should look at managing the human factor in daily operations of getting that done. The first thing is that we'll look at the human reliability analysis, proactively manage human failure or non-compliance. You see, as people, that's why God created us with will. Now, because we are created with will, to manage people is one of the most challenging task you will ever have, and then to manage people in a project, and then to manage people in relation to a project like drafting of SOPs, you need to be able to manage whatever errors may come forth. You also need to manage whatever failures may arise from what they are working on. And you may also need to manage non-compliance. How do you manage this? You manage this by mitigating the risk. And then you mitigate the risk by knowing that this is what is likely to happen. Somebody may likely not do a thorough research. Someone may likely not submit on the due date. Someone may not even be bothered to check the compliance issues. You see, in this instance, let us limit the issue of compliance to regulatory issues. Industry regulatory issues are very important. They can make or break a company. If we don't comply to industry regulatory issues, we are setting up the company for failure. Therefore, those who are leading the team in drafting the SOPs, they need to be prepared beforehand and have all these mitigating factors at the ready. So when they are getting input from members, they are checking it against what the standard is expected to be, especially in terms of the regulatory issues, so that the company will not run foul of the law. They will not run foul of the law, because in the long run, if you are working in such a way that you are not compliant to regulatory issues, it is only a matter of time. The government is all seeing and all knowing. One day will be one day. The chicken will come home to roost. So those who are leading the team for creating the SOP, because this SOP is basically like the manual that each new person, when they resume at a job, they are able to have access to the soft file. No one is printing SOPs again. They are now available on SharePoint. So they would now go to that SharePoint and read to understand and ask questions where necessary. Imagine that we have now done a shoddy job. We have put in things that are no longer relevant in 2026 and beyond. We have disregarded the regulatory issues. That means that anybody who is coming up to take up a role and we give them that SOP, we are basically preparing the person to fail, and we are preparing the company to fail in the long run. That's why it is very, very important for the team leads to have this human reliability analysis, mitigate the risks that may likely occur. That's basically what we mean there. And then we'll talk about performance under pressure, implement strategies to manage stress and burnout. This is very obvious. When people are working on a project, they are not working on a project in isolation. They are working on a project in addition to their normal duties at work. Therefore, we need to plan it in such a way that they have enough time, not only to do the work, but to rest in between it. Man is not a machine. A human being is not. Even machines do break down now. Machines break down. I've seen on a very lighter note, I've seen cases where AI even get fed up with those that are asking, that are inputting and asking for queries. It will even tell you what you don't want to know, because even you have not properly thought out what you are asking it to do. So it's the same way with people. When we invite people to work on a project, we should plan it in such a way that they have time to rest in between completion of the project, so that they can keep bringing forth their best performance. Pressure is a part of life, but managing pressure and stress is also very important in order to get good results. Now, SOP maintenance and feedback loops. Implement regular reviews and document updates to align with changes in the industry. We discussed it when I made an example of the aviation industry. At the very least, there should be an annual review of SOP, at the very least. But then, when there's an update that's come from government, that's come from industry, that's come from anywhere, that may even come from the customer feedback, that needs to be updated into the SOP. So we need to have that clearly established. The SOP is not a document that is done and final and remains like that forever. No, it is a constantly changing document. It's a document that is constantly being updated. So we need to have this as a policy, clearly stated. How often is going to be reviewed? Whose responsibility is this to check the final review? And the industry changes. What days from when a new update in the industry comes up that we update our SOP? This is very, very key. Can we go to module 4 now? Okay, integrating operational excellence into talent life cycle. In HR, if you are involved in any project, you always look at the talent side of it, because you are in human resources. The talent side of it is very critical. It's also where you also demonstrate your competence. And in everything we do, it's important for us to always demonstrate competence. We are only as good as our last performance, actually. Nobody is going to talk about your performance 15 years ago on a job or last year. No, you were given a task last week. How did you perform? So that determines how you are assessed. So in HR, anything that concerns talent, we take it as utmost importance. So now, after creating the SOPs, working with the SOPs, with the operations team, having a standard document that meets the needs of the organization. As HR, what do you now do? You integrate that operational excellence into talent lifecycle. In the first instance, recruitment and onboarding. Designing SOPs for hiring and integrating new talents into the operational culture seamlessly. As the HR, it is your responsibility to ensure that the SOP is available for all new staff upon resumption. It is part of their onboarding process. And in that particular instance, where it has to do with SOP. The team lead or line manager in the departments where the talent is going to be deployed, that is the person that is going to lead the discussion when it comes to that SOP, because the person is expected to be the best in the know of how the department is running, what is required to achieve progress in that department. So this is very, very key for us in human resources. And we also need to let our colleagues in operations know why this is also key. SOPs must be included as part of the onboarding process. It is very, 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 very important, because it ensures that the flow of work in the organization does not get disrupted under the guise of I did not know, I was not told. There is no I was not told, where you have a proper onboarding system that includes discussion of the SOP, and then the new hire will sign off, even if it's by acknowledging through email that they have gone through it, they've asked necessary questions, they understand, so that every new person that is being hired in the company knows that understanding and working with the SOP is sacrosanct. Okay, we also talk about training and development, linking employee growth to organizational competence requirements through structured SOPs. This cannot be overemphasized. Training and development is the bedrock of organizational success. Any company where you see that there is no training taking place, it means that there's no learning, there's no newness. If there's no newness in life, you must always embrace newness. Not embracing newness, the opposite of that is the living dead. It means that you are aware, you are alive, but there's no newness, there's no innovation, because you're not learning anything. So we need to link the growth of the employee to organizational growth and back to the SOP, as we discussed in the first point above. Because you, in that SOP for each department, it will indicate the mandatory training, meaning that anybody that is taking up a new job, they are meant to come in having been trained on this, having secured this. But as part of the organizational growth, the company will commit to training the person every 6 months, every 3 months in this area, and the staff must demonstrate knowledge in so and so areas that the person has been trained with. When we have this in SOPs, we find out that it makes it easier to achieve our training plan. Training plan is not just what we will just bring out and roll out and everybody will discuss, laugh happily and go. No, it has to be embedded into the SOP. This is very critical for us in human resources, and we should also let the operations team know this is also very important, because that's how we work together to achieve the organizational goals. Now, we look at metrics and accountability. Using HR metrics to measure the success of operational initiatives. Whatever is not measured, you do not have a way of knowing if it has achieved its objective. That's what we are talking about here. And there are some ways we can measure to know the impacts of what we are doing with regards to these SOPs and whatnot. I have penciled down some to discuss. So one, we can look at, the kind of metrics and evaluation we can look at is a performance evaluation, not individual performance, but operational, not individual performance, but company performance. In the first instance, we can look at quality. So in looking at quality, we'll look at the quality of work, the output. You have to measure the quality output against the acceptable standard. One. And then you also look at quality in terms of customer satisfaction index. You work with the department that is in charge of that. They need to let you know what the customer satisfaction index is. How many people are satisfied with our service, whatever service we are rendering? How many complaints do we get? How often are these complaints resolved? These are part of what we measure to know that our SOP SOP is actually effective. If we don't measure any of this, we may not actually know. We'll just be going through the process year in, year out. Very quickly, we also look at the financials. In this instance, you work with the accounts department to determine the revenue per employee. Because if we are designing SOPs, we are doing all of this, the revenue must keep going up. That's the essence of being in business. The revenue must be increasing. The revenue cannot be decreasing. We cannot be going through SOPs, doing training, doing all manner of things, and the revenue is dropping. If the revenue is dropping, it means that there's something we are doing wrong. We need to go back and then look at the process all over again, analyze to determine what the problem is. And then we should also look at last but not the least is operations and the customer acquisition rates. Any business is out for customers. How many customers are we getting over a period of time? Have we documented in the SOPs how to get new customers? And then how many customers are we getting over a period of time? Are we getting new customers or we are not getting new customers? All these are very, very important. All these are very important to measure in order to know if our SOP is effective, if our culture is adapting to change. So it's what we mean by the metrics. It's very important to measure everything that we do. All right then. Thank you very much. If there are questions or feedback, I'll take them, or if we have to wait until after the next session. Miriam, thank you very much. The next slide.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Oluwatoye, for that practical and insightful presentation. So I think we'll just leave the questions and feedback for after our second speaker is done with our presentation. So thank you so much for that. And I particularly appreciated how you highlighted the importance of the human element in operational excellence. I mean, not just the creation of SOPs, but particularly the need for the collaboration between HR and operations to collaborating on creating SOPs that are actually sustainable in the real work environment. So building on the foundation that you've just laid, we'll be taking this conversation a bit further. So we'll be looking at how data and people insights can be leveraged to design even more effective SOPs. So it is with pleasure that I now introduce our second speaker, Confidence Obenawakama, to speak to us on data-driven SOPs, leveraging people insights for operational efficiency. So thank you so much, Confidence, for your time with us today. And yes, so over to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, those in Nigeria, and good day to those who are not currently on the same time zone. Thank you so much, Miriam, for that introduction. And I'm particularly very pleased to be here today with everybody and talk about this very interesting topic. I'm someone who is very passionate about data. I'm very interested in data. I like when decisions are made based on existing data because I believe that alone, is going to just give us the results that we may not even have expected, results that we may not have anticipated, because data shows a lot of things. Perceptions can lie, opinions can lie, but data is one thing that majority of the time doesn't tell lies, because it shows patterns, it shows behavioral patterns and all of those things. And data is one thing that you can base your decisions on. Now, we're going to be talking about how we use data to improve on SOPs. And before I move on, I would particularly like to say a very wonderful thank you to Ms. Oluwatoye for a powerful first session. That was really insightful. Majority of the things that she even said are things I was going to talk about, but we're going to build on that. So next slide, next two slides, please. Okay. So we're going to look at the foundation of data-driven SOPs. We'll talk about data-driven SOPs themselves, talk about the problems, core problems. We'll talk about the framework called the people framework, and then we'll talk about how we turn insights into actions and how HR and operations are to collaborate based on insight, based on data, and also we'll have to differentiate how traditional SOPs used to function and now the new ways of building SOPs, which is data. And we'll look at a case study and also look at how to implement these data-driven SOPs. All right, let's move on. Next slide. All right. Basically, I'm sure from the first session we must have understood what SOPs are. They are basically like step-by-step processes, structured documents that give instructions, that give you guide, how a task should be done. And these things, they vary across different organizations. Even organizations within the same industry have these different processes to doing things. And the reason why SOPs exist in the first place is because we want to create consistency. We don't want a case where someone who comes into the organization and they're beginning to do things different, or we're beginning to have like outputs that are not the same. We want to have consistent output. So we want consistency in execution. We want to, like I said, reduce variability in outcome. We also want to ensure that we are compliant. When we don't have SOPs, people tend to do things based on perception, based on feelings. So we want to, minimize all of that. We want to minimize errors, and we want to improve on training and onboarding. That's the reason why SOPs exist in the first place. Imagine a new hire coming into a system and the manager or the line manager or the team lead has to now start training a new hire over and over again, based like for every new person we bring to the team, there's a new training, like step-by-step process. But when there is SOPs available on whatever platform you use, if it's in your HRIS, if it's in your Google Drive, if it's on SharePoint, whatever platform you use, every new hire will be assigned to use those SOPs, will be asked to read through those SOPs and understand the system. Now, as I was saying, SOPs basically answer how do we do this here. You can come from an organization within the same industry, but things are done differently there. So our SOPs tells you how we do things here, not you bringing how you do things over there. That's the reason why we have SOPs within every organization. Next slide, please. All right. Now, data-driven SOPs are a whole different game altogether. Now, data-driven SOPs, they do like different categories of things. They define how work is done and what success looks like. Now, we're not just saying this is how we do things from step 1 to step 2, from step 2 to step 3. We are telling you, if you follow this through, this is the output we expect. And this is possible because these SOPs have been designed based on data, like data inputs. Like we get data and then we put back those, like the result of the data, back into the SOPs to improve them. Now, we also use these SOPs to measure KPIs. We use it to measure performance data, because if everybody is using the same process and we are having results that are different, it's really a pointer to understand, okay, what's going on? Why is the performance different across different individuals within the same team? Okay, and we also use these SOPs to identify behavioral patterns, workflow insights. We also use it to get feedback and regular review cycles and all of those things. So when it comes to data-driven SOPs, this is answering, is this process working? If it's not working, we need to have a change. What does the data reveal? What should we improve on? So all of these things, when you're using a data-driven SOP, you're getting timely feedback. You're getting real-time feedback. For example, let's take recruitment, for example. I once worked with a company where we handled recruitment for client companies, US-based client companies. And then there was one pattern we noticed. Usually our SOPs was for all recruiters that join, that are hired. We have an SOP that clearly states how the recruitment process goes. from getting the job description from the CRM, from the job platform, and then creating job descriptions, because every recruiter, you're required to create a job descriptions based off of what the department is not creating that, but we always peer review them. So from creating all of those to sending out the email. Now, where we noticed we had a bottleneck was during the recruitment process. We noticed that we had high drop-off rate when before they even get to the first interview. That's when the recruiter are reaching out to them via email, and when they're having a conversation with the recruiter via LinkedIn. So the drop-off was due to the fact that at that stage, the profile of the company is kept, like it's anonymous at that point in time. But you will get to understand or know about the company and get the profile of the company, after your first interview. Like during the first interview, the head of recruitment is going to disclose all of that. We noticed that we had high drop-off rate at that point because a lot of candidates are, they are very skeptical about, okay, I don't know the company, even though this offer looks nice, but I'm not sure I want to leave what I'm doing, or I want to really participate in this process if the profile is completely anonymous. So we noticed that we had top candidates. You would find a candidate, and by the time they're asking about company profile, they're telling you, I think I'll pass on this. So we noticed that the outreach messages are like across all recruiters. We ask them, okay, let's see the messages you send. Let's see your communication. And by the time we looked at the communication, we realized that, it's not really, the messages being sent out are not really clear. It was giving the idea of, anonymosity. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes to be curious, especially when it comes to a job. So we had to refine that. We had to create a message that explains the properties, let's say the properties of the company. But even though we're not going to be disclosing the profile of the company at that point, we still gave the candidates like how do I put this? We still give the candidates like extra knowledge. At least they know what they're getting into. They know this is the size of the company, this is the industry, this is why we are hiring for this role, and this is even why the company is anonymous at this point. We are quietly replacing a role, or we are moving into we're trying to break into a different industry, and all of those things. So at the time when we were able to incorporate this into the messages that the recruiters are sending us, we noticed that the drop-off rates reduced drastically. We stopped having the complaint from recruiters of candidates are dropping off and all of that, and we were able to get more candidates through the pipeline. So what am I trying to say? When it comes to SOPs, you have to base it on data. Find out what's not working. Why is this happening? Check performance of things. And this is why in current times, data-driven SOPs are, I don't think there's any company currently still using traditional SOPs that are very static. All right, next slide, please. All right, now we'll talk about the core problems and why SOPs fail most of the time. And I think I've even covered it in the previous slide, but we'll go over them. Most of the SOPs fail because they are written ones and they are rarely updated. The previous speaker mentioned using an SOP created 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and still using it now and expecting to be compliant with the changes that have happened with the change in technology and all of that, updates that have been happening. You cannot use an SOP that was created, even an SOP created even last year. Most of the time, it will come to a point this year that it will begin to fail. So you have to SOPs cannot be static. And that's one of the reasons why SOPs fail. And companies say, there's an SOP. When I was working in the healthcare industry, we usually create SOPs. In fact, healthcare basically works on SOPs because we have procedures to, especially when it comes to laboratory, we have procedures to every for every laboratory process. So in the healthcare industry, you must have SOPs. However, because there are ongoing health research going on, you cannot say your SOPs are static. Initially, we used to have, in the healthcare industry, we used to test for typhoid using Widal tests. Right now, that is outdated, completely outdated. You cannot tell me in the healthcare industry, you cannot say that you have typhoid, go and do Widal. That test is completely outdated. So what does that mean? It means that even across all industries, SOPs change because times change. There are new research. There are behavioral patterns that are constantly changing. Leadership is changing. Policies are changing. Government policies are changing rapidly. So you cannot afford to have a static SOP because they will fail. Now, another thing is that sometimes SOPs are based on assumption instead of real data. You cannot assume that this is why this should happen. It has to be based on real data, like real life data. You cannot assume that you're having employees that are not maybe you have an issue with clock out or missed clocking punches and all of that. You cannot assume that it is because employees are exhausted and they forget to punch. You have to get real data on that. You cannot just base it on assumption. We have poor collaboration between HR and operations. Now, this is where this particular topic is actually based on. HR collaborating with operations. The operations department handle workflow, day-to-day activities. A lot of times, HR may not have real insight into what the workflow looks like. Now, that is why operations and HR have to collaborate, because we have to get insight on this workflow that is happening outside where happening like within the company, and then operations and HR will collaborate based on their insight and HR data. HR keeps the data, people data, business data. Operation brings the workflow insights, and we're able to merge these two together to give us an SOP that will actually work. Now, most times we base our SOPs on compliance rather than performance. A lot of times we also measure, we do not forget to measure KPIs or outcome, and we begin to measure some other things that are not even business related. So this list of things are some of the major reasons why we have SOPs that fail. And if we don't, correct them or change the way SOPs are created, they will continue to fail. Next slide, please. No. All right. Quickly, we're going to talk about maturity levels of SOPs, and we have from level 1 to level 4, where level 1 is the documented SOPs. Here we just have basic instructions, it's static, it's compliance focused. Level 2 is standardized, where we now have an SOPs that is consistent across all teams within the organization, and then possibly have some structure, but it's not really data driven. We're not measuring anything at this point. Now we move over to the measured SOPs. Now this is where we now attach KPIs. This measured SOPs, we now use it to measure performance. Every new hire in the company understand that your performance is also tied to how you follow your SOPs. We track performance. We track the performance of your job. We track the output of your job. If you're getting output, if you're not getting output, we track it, because sometimes across teams you have people using the same SOPs, but then there are behavioral patterns to measure. All right, and then the level 4 is the adaptive SOPs. This is where we now this is the point where we're now taking the SOPs to a higher level. So we are now constantly evolving, constantly changing things within the SOPs. We are driven by real-time data. We're integrating, across HR and operational. We're improving outcome. Now, let's imagine you're driving a car without dashboard, and you're taking, like, where you're going to. You know that when you get to a particular junction, you take your right, you get to another junction, you take your left, but you're moving without a dashboard. Obviously, you may not know when you're overspeeding, you may not know when there is a check engine light on, you may not know when your fuel gauge is dropping, you may not know when the car door is open. A lot of those things. Now, this is exactly what happens when you're not using data to build an SOP. This is what static SOPs looks like. Basically, you know where to go, but there is nothing measured. So sometimes you go overboard or you underperform, even while following the SOPs. You may be expected to get there, to get to your destination in 15 minutes if you're driving at 40 kilometers an hour. Okay, but then you may be driving at you may be driving at 30 or 20 kilometers an hour, and then you're getting there in 25 minutes. That's something that has to be measured if you're using data to actually build your SOPs. Next slide, please. Hello? All right, thank you very much. Now we'll look at the people framework. Now this is the framework where we understand how everything feeds into creating a data-driven SOP. So first of all, we'll talk about performance metrics. Now, when you're creating an SOP that has to be data driven, we have to define what success should look like. Okay, we have to define what success should look like. We have to define if success is probably for, let's say we're using the marketing team and what we want a case where we have a certain number of products sold within a month. So that should feed into the SOP. Employees should be able to see that within the SOP, especially employees that are newly on board. They should be able to see that, okay, one of the KPIs that we're going to be tracking, what success looks like in your role as a marketer, should be that you're selling hundreds. You're creating you're creating revenue for the company by selling 100 pieces of a product, whatever the KPI is. But using marketing as an example, you're selling 100 pieces of a product. One of the previous companies I worked with, they produced boric acid suppositories. Now, one of the KPIs we set within our SOPs for the marketing team is that for every we had guides, we had the boric acid suppositories. So one of the KPIs that we set was revenue for the company by selling at least 50 pieces of these suppositories globally. It's not a very because we had lots of marketers. So 50 pieces of this suppository monthly. And truthfully, we had marketers that were hitting and even making revenues by selling more of those suppositories every month. So now that gives us data to see that, okay, these KPIs are working. So how do we help people who are not able to meet these KPIs? We have to call them into coaching. We have to ask them, okay, what's going on? What are the challenges? And those things now inform, gives us information on how to further audit the SOPs and see how much we can improve it. Because like the previous speaker said, people are the center of this. It's people that drive all of these results. So if you cannot get people insights, you will not be able to create an SOP that actually work. Another thing we have to look at is another thing that feeds into the data-driven SOPs the employee behavior, how people work. Recently, I had an experience with like with my company where we had people that had missing punches. What we usually do is at the end of the work day, of course, all employees are to clock out, and then the HR department review the time card exceptions. So going into the system ADP, we are seeing we have 20 time card exceptions. Like you're going the next day and you see 20 time card exceptions, and we are wondering, why are people missing punches? You come in the morning, you take a break, you're supposed to punch in time across all of those. You're supposed to punch in time, so that we'll be able to have an idea, have data on people's workflow, their timing, when they come into work, when they start, and how productive that is. And people are missing punches, and every day HR has to go in to remind, hey, we send message on Teams, hey, you missed a punch on this date. And we see that we constantly had repeat offenders, so we started to track it. We started to keep a spreadsheet where we track daily who missed punches, what punch did they miss, and all of that. And then we were able to relate with operations and look, your employees are missing punches, and we showed the data, the sheet to operations, and the operations manager, she was wondering like what's going. She was surprised, and so we had to now the operations manager had to go into departments to ask the managers what's going on, why your team members missing punches. And we showed the managers the spreadsheet that we have. Look, this person missed. Like HR has to constantly remind this person to have their punches imputed every single day. And then we had to, we start getting inside that a lot of times some employees, leave in the middle of work, so they don't get to punch in their time. Some of the employees are exhausted, some of them have emergencies and all of that, so they forget. And so with all of this data we have gathered, we had to now HR and operations had to collaborate and come up with something that would work. And one of the things that we did was that we had operations to create a workflow and automation that automatically pops up on your screen when it's almost clock out, like an hour to clock out. There's an automation that automatically pops up on your screen and to tell you, do not forget to clock out in 1 hour, or just whatever. Because with that, we had to let the employee tell us, okay, what time do you clock in? Some employee clock in at 9, some clock in at 10. So with that, we know that you're working an 8-hour work day. So we know so automatically gives an automation of when you are going to take a break. Within the time period, take a break, please endeavor to punch in your break time and all of those things. So with that, we were able to mitigate the excess of missed punches, and we noticed that repeat offense reduced drastically. So now this is one of the examples on how employee behavior would help improve SOPs if HR can track it and relate these things to operations, so that we can collaborate and know and understand why these things are happening. This is employee behavior. Why this behavior is why we have this behavior, consistently happening within the organizations. Also, other things that feed into the framework is process automations, like system insights, like I mentioned. When it comes to system insights, it also tells us what's going on within, what's going on virtually. For example, onboarding. Some organizations run their onboarding process via their HRIS. Now, if you want to understand how the onboarding process goes, whether for customers, if you're having client onboarding, if you're running that through your CRM, or you're running candidate onboarding through your HRIS, you can get data that would inform your SOPs, your onboarding SOPs through your system. You would know from your system, you would know where the bottlenecks are, and you can relate this. You can collaborate on this with the operations department to come up with SOPs that are data driven, that are based on the data you're getting from your system. You can know where you're having most customer dropouts, where customers are leaving your offers, or you can get to know where you're having lower slower onboarding rates, if candidates get stuck at what point, what managers are not very quick to give responses, and then you can improve on that by giving a time frame. You can give a time frame that, okay, after observation we have seen that most candidates get stuck with one-on-one meetings with manager one, or whatever manager that's supposed to be handling this aspect of their onboarding, so they are stuck. So we can now give a time frame that meetings with this manager has to happen a day after this person joins the organization, and collaborate with the manager to understand what time is best for them, so that we don't have people stuck in the process and then we're having an onboarding pipeline that is so packed. Another thing that feeds into the framework is continuous improvement. Like we've been mentioning all along, you have to continuously improve even when you use data to feed in your SOPs, you continue checking the data, because there's always something to measure. People, like we've already established, people are the center of all of these things. So there is nobody that is static. There's nobody that is that is a sword in a stone. So people behaviors affect all of these things. Situations affect all of these things, policies affect all of these things. So you have to continuously improve. You have to check what's going on, why things are happening, and you have to use that to continuously improve on your SOP, so that people would be able to work. Even with systems, I've had a situation where we had a system, we had an SOP based on the system, how to, like, the step-by-step process on how to achieve results within the software. And one thing we failed to check was updates. There was an update on the system, and then the process changed, and we had a new hire that came in, and we gave out the SOPs. Okay, use these SOPs, and the new hire was getting stuck in the process. We were not getting results, and we were always constantly following up, like, hey, what's going on? We're not seeing any progress, until we had to check, and we saw that, oh, there has been an update in the system, and the layout has changed. So what we have on SOP is completely different from what this new hire is seeing on system. So you have to continuously check, even system, even software, you have to continuously check and continuously improve your SOPs. Now, learning feedback also feed into all of this. Now, when you train, I think the previous speaker, Ms. Oluwatoyin, mentioned this. When you train people, there's feedback. When people go through training, there is feedback. Now, a lot of times, when HR and operations collaborates, most times we get the feedback from even the employees, because they are the ones that work these jobs. They are the ones that go through the process. So most times they are the ones that give us the feedback. Okay, when we ask, why is this not working, or what's going on, we get the feedback from the employees. Now, when you have employees that do the jobs, or that have gone through training, and then they are now back to improve on how they work within their process, the best thing you can do as HR is to ensure that you get the feedback, like, how has this training influenced how we do the job, or how has this training how did this training help us improve on the way we do it, on the way we do this job. And we use that to work on our SOPs, because that is real-time data, because they would understand that, okay, there are certain things that we have changed, certain processes or new systems, or even AI technology that we are going to be using now, and that has to reflect on the SOPs, because of course SOPs are training documents. Now, lastly, we're going to talk about the operational bottlenecks now, where work slows down. This is also an aspect of this is another point that feeds data-driven SOPs. Now, we want to know, where does work slow down? What is causing delays in feedback? Why are we having a lot of customer complaint tickets and all of those things? Those are operational bottlenecks. Why are we not having things shipped out as at when due? Why are customers having delays in receiving their shipments? All of these things are operational bottlenecks that feed into our SOPs. By the time HR is able to identify all of these things, we'll be able to understand why these things are occurring, what the department that is concerned in this area, what is the problem, so that we'll be able to know what we can change and how we can change them. And then all of these things feed into how our SOPs are constantly evolving. Next slide, please. Okay, all right, we're going to look at turning insights into actions. And this is where we're just going to talk briefly about how HR and operations collaborate. Now, the HR department provides, like I said, we provide workforce data, we provide engagement trend, we provide the retention patterns, we provide employee behavior. We see these things. Okay, the HR department monitor all of these things and we see them. So when we notice all of these things, we calling the operation department to understand what's going on. We check their workflow process, their workflow mapping, their automation process that has been set up. We check for bottleneck analysis and we check for execution timelines. These are the things that because operations are at the forefront of daily day-to-day work management and all of that. So when we're able to get this insights together, we're able to build smarter workflows. All right. Now we had when I worked with a manufacturing company, we had a serious issue with our logistics department. We noticed late we are getting complaints from our clients, like people we're shipping out to, that there's constant delays. Like the customer support complaint tickets were becoming so much. It was becoming too much that the HR department had to step in to ask what's going on within the logistics department. Why are shipments being delayed? Why are we having too many complaints coming into the system? And then we called in operations to understand what's going on within the logistics department. And then we found out a whole lot of things. We found out a whole lot of things that was wrong with their workflow. And these are the things that we had to start mitigating because we were losing customers, the business was losing revenue, and we were noticing if we continue this way, it's not going to be really good on the business. And it's not as if the business wasn't doing well previously, but the business just started cascading down. So we had to call in operations to look into what is wrong within the department. And we noticed that the process that people are taking, things have evolved. This company is a company that has existed since the 1990s. So of course, a lot of the SOPs that the departments are used to were we are not constantly changing, but the company itself was changing with technology. We were introducing new technology, we're introducing new processes, but the SOPs are the same, and we are constantly recruiting. We were recruiting account managers, we were recruiting people in the logistics department, supply chain operators, and all of those things. But SOPs are the same. And these are the SOPs that these people would go through when they join the organization. So we noticed that was when we started. It took us months to really come up with new SOPs that were going to match what is constant, what is like the new trend, the new updates within the organization, within the business, within the industry environment. We had to start changing all of those things. Now, this is where, like we've already mentioned before, this is where data plays in, understanding what is not working, why it's not working. And you cannot do that if you don't have like a feedback system where you get all of this data from. You should be able to communicate with your employees, because like I mentioned before, it's not just HR observation or whatever, you have to get data from your workforce. You have to understand, because they are the forefront, they are the people who are doing this job. You have to understand if they are getting exhausted, if the workforce is, if the talent, what's the word? If you have less employees but you have more workload, if the employees are smaller and you have more, and you have to now, recruit within that department. These are things that will feed into your system. These are things that will help HR and operations to be able to get SOPs that are data driven, that will improve, that will increase efficiency, that will improve, that will give better outcomes, and that will be able to use to measure, proper performance. Next slide, please. Hello. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. All right, I think we've pretty much covered the difference between traditional SOPs and data-driven SOPs, and we've said that traditional SOPs are mostly static. They are assumption focused, they are compliance, a lot of times just based on compliance and not real work, not real performance, and we don't have metrics to measure. They are reactive, and this is one of the downsides of traditional SOPs. It's when something happens we begin to create SOPs and all of that, but that's not how it's supposed to be. For data-driven SOPs, we expect the SOPs to be dynamic, and that's exactly what we have now. That's what most of the companies are doing now. It's data informed, it's performance driven, it's KPI driven, it's proactive. We anticipate needs based on, especially when we get new process within the company, new system within the company, the operations department will go through that. We get feedback on that system. We understand the system, what we are using it for, and the possible change it will bring to our process, and then we use that to feed into our SOPs. Okay, it's collaborative. It's not just something that HR will just sit down in their office and just come up with without understanding, real work matters, without understanding what's going on at the forefront of operations. So it's something that's collaborative. We collaborate with the operations department. We collaborate with even line managers to understand what's going on within their team, so that we can be able to create SOPs that are not, old tale, that are not stale, that are constantly changing, so that people that are coming into the department, when it comes to onboarding, we don't have to start policing, because that's one of the things that happens. That's one of the reasons why SOPs have to be data driven, because if your company is constantly recruiting, you need to have an SOP that is up to date, so that you don't have to start going back and forth with new hires. Next slide, please. All right. Very quickly, I think I've talked about onboarding and recruitment when it comes to SOPs. So this is just a brief case study of what transforming onboarding SOPs would look like. We've already discussed this previously. You need to move from just giving a checklist to checking for ramp up time, increase, use data to check what's going on with your previous system, what's not working, why people are stuck at a particular point. Use them to improve your SOPs, track milestones, do role specific training, not just one generic training for everybody that comes into the company. We are just doing one training. There's no role specific training. You're going to get new hires that are completely confused. They don't know what's going on. They don't know anything about what they're supposed to do, because your training is just generic. And if you're able to use data to improve your onboarding system, you will see better results. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. How you handle data-driven SOPs: you audit your system, you measure, and then you optimize. this is what we've been saying all over and over again. You start with any process, you audit it and find where inefficiencies exist. And then you measure what success should look like. If you want to hire within 20 days, you want to hire within 30 days, you should be able to measure what your success look like and measure, check and audit what has been going on. If your recruitment has been taking 50 days, 40 days, 48 days for different roles, you have to measure that and measure what your success should look like. And then you create an SOP that is going to check where the bottleneck is coming from. If it's coming from communication, if it's coming from meeting scheduling with hiring managers and all of those things, you check all of that and then you feed it into your SOPs. I already gave an example of this when I talked about the recruitment issue we had with the client company. So yes, next slide, please. All right. These are the key takeaways. Like I've always said, SOPs should be living systems. Treat them as living beings. They should not be static. Use data to transform your SOPs from compliance tools to performance drivers. HR and operations must always collaborate and share their insights. Use data-driven changes. Use data to significantly improve all of your outcomes. Just as no matter how small your company is, there is always data to use to improve your outcomes, and consistently review your SOPs. You can review every quarter. You can review every quarter. You can review just depend on how your process looks like. You can understand how you review your SOPs to ensure that it's always up to date. It's not it's not stale. All right, so I think that's the end of this presentation. We're going to be taking questions after now. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much, Ms. Confidence, for that wonderful presentation. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. Okay, so now we move on to the feedback and the question and answer section for this webinar. All right, so our listeners, our participants, please do well to drop your questions and answers in the comment section, and we'll be taking them as you drop them. Thank you so much. So I do have a question. I think my first question will be going to Ms. Oluwatoyi. Okay, before I go on to my question, I think we have the feedback here. Okay, we have, this person is joining anonymously, and it says, just thinking out loud, I think limiting SOPs creation to HR and operations may not always be sufficient. SOPs go beyond documenting steps. They should reflect how processes actually work in practice, highlight potential risks, and outline appropriate controls. To achieve this effectively, it's often helpful to involve multiple functions who could be involved. SOPs are typically more effective when approached from a cross-functional perspective. Operations handle the day-to-day. I don't know if that is the end of that feedback or that suggestion, but I think that's where it's ended here. So thank you so much, Mr. or Miss Anonymous, for that. And that is particularly the highlight of today's presentation. I think what you just stated out or were addressed by both of our speakers in their presentations. So, like I said, please keep the questions coming and we'll be glad to have them. So I said earlier that I have a question for Ms. Oluwatoyi. So Ms. Oluwatoyi, you mentioned during the course of your presentation that, or okay, let me frame it this way. What do you think is the biggest mistake organizations make when they focus more on tools, on their everyday tools, everyday workplace tools, and not on the people of the organizations?
Okay. I'd like to thank you for that question. It's a very key point. The major thing that tends to happen is that the results will not be achieved, because when you miss out the people factor, the tools won't work themselves. You need people to use those tools. So if you don't factor in the people aspect of anything you are working on, you are most likely not going to achieve your desired results. That's where you hear companies complain that I pumped in so much capital, I'm not getting the results. I'm having people problems. Such companies will always have people problems. People who have staff resigning, people going in and out. Like the second speaker said, my colleague, she said that when you have a company, people are resigning, it's a red flag. This is one of the reasons, because there's no focus on the talent. So when there's too much focus on the tools, there's too much focus on the resources without adequate focus on the human talent, you would tend not to achieve the very same results of which you are pumping your capital and acquiring tools. The people must be at the center of everything that you are doing. And then one unique factor about people is that it is actually at the center of the business itself, because you are rendering services to clients. Clients are people. So if your people strategy is not right internally, your people strategy will not be right externally, the company will not grow. That's my take.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Oluwatoye. I think you nailed the question, or you nailed the answer, actually. That was exactly my question. So thank you so much for that. So, Ms. Confidence, I do have a question for you too. I know you were particular about data and people insights. So in a case where an organization does not have the advanced analytical tools to actually even analyze this data, how do you think the HR team can leverage on the people insights data they get to still get the answers or the insights that they need? I don't know if my question is well framed.
Okay, yes, it is. I understand your question perfectly well. All right, so like I mentioned during the presentation, even though it's a small business, we don't have to, because of course small businesses, not all of them can afford, really big systems or software or tools. Now, in cases like that, there are tools that are very accessible. You can use a spreadsheet. Very simple stuff. How many employees do you possibly have? You can use a spreadsheet to keep the record of your employees. You can have maybe a team leader keep a detailed spreadsheet where you have reports of work done, or reports on how work is done, and all of those things. So with simple things like that, with just using basic documents, you can be able to gather reports, and from the reports you get, you can now get insight to what's going on. You can ask questions like you mentioned that this is what went on this week within your department. Can you tell me what happened for you to get this result, or what happened with this employee, or what happened with this result, or who was responsible for this result, based on reports. And you can use that. You don't need elaborate systems, okay? Because I know that in recent time we have systems that track all of these things automatically because employee use them. But manually, you can use spreadsheets, you can use basic documents to get your reports and do your analysis. It's not
Hello, Ms. Okay. All right. I think you were frozen for a second there.
Okay. Can you hear me
All right. Thank you so much for that answer.
now?
Yes, yes. I think there was a lag actually. It was a lag. So I got the other part of the message.
Okay.
All right. So thank you so much for
Sorry
that
about that.
answer. I think we have a feedback here. We have a suggestion here from Babawale Ayopami Otitoju. He says, thank you for this presentation. SOPs is a continuous process and should always be updated when changes occur. I actually believe a good SOP must bring together all inputs from stakeholders of the organization. Thank you. So, Ms. Confidence, what do you think about that? Do you think SOP should be made from inputs from all stakeholders within the organization?
Yes. I think during the presentation, I actually mentioned that we're not just getting insight. We're not just getting information from just HR observation and operations and operational insight. We're also getting from I mentioned managers. I even mentioned employees themselves. People who are at the forefront of where the work is done. Let's get insight from them. Let's understand what the process looks like for them. Let's understand where they have issues, and all of those things will inform our decisions or inform our input in the SOPs, because with that we have real-time data, not just something that is based on assumption or based on just because operations said it. Sometimes we need to actually hear from the horse's mouth. We need to hear from the team members handling a particular process. So yes, I think a good SOPs actually does bring together input from major stakeholders.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Ms. Oluwatoyin, would you like to add something to what Ms. Confidence just said?
Okay, yeah. I think that based on the previous comments where someone said that everybody is not just HR and operations, I think there's a misconception. When we say operations, people are, from what I can understand, people may be thinking that SOP is just one SOP for the entire company. No, SOP is delineated departmental wise. So if we say operations means the operatives of that department. Therefore, the operatives in accounts and finance would be different from the operatives in marketing, the operatives in customer service, different from the operatives in human resources. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not one SOP for the entire organization. It's SOPs according to departments. That's why we say operations. Operations does not necessarily mean that people in business operations. It means that people in the department of that work, they are the ones who are collaborating with the HR, which HR is collaborating with all the entire departments to create SOPs for individual departments. It's not one master SOP for the entire company. I just wanted to clarify that. It is delineated departmental wise, and in the department is delineated according to functions and roles. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for clarifying that. All right, thank you. I do not think we have any other question at the moment. I think our speakers did a very amazing job. That we do not have questions, but we do have suggestions and feedback. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think we have come to the end of our presentation today, episode, edition for this month's webinar. So before I go to that, I'd like to thank our speakers. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your dedication, your performance, your commitment to this presentation is well appreciated. So thank you so much for joining us today, and do have a lovely day. I think we'll be meeting at the back end just to have a little conversation after this. So thank you so much.